you. Shoot me in the head. That was Emil Matasauranu. My name's Kevin, and this is History Goon. Now, you're probably wondering to yourself, if you're watching on video, why do you own a 3-hole balaclava? Well, the answer to that is don't worry about it. Anyway, this week, we are talking about Larry Phillips and Emil Matasauranu, who committed one of the most brazen, broad daylight bank heists in the history of the United States. For me, this holds a special place in my weird little heart because this happened when I was about 10 years old. And this was the first thing that I really remember seeing on the news for like a big event like this, where you actually saw it happen live. And in a way, this is what actually got me into the whole true crime thing, especially the type of true crime that I do here, where I'm not going to talk about serial killers or, people being ripped apart by psychopaths or anything like that. I want to talk about bank robbers and bikers and mobsters and stuff like this. So this is going to be a big episode. Grab something to drink, grab a snack. We're going to be here for a while. The best place to start is right at the very beginning with our ringleader, Larry Phillips Jr., who was born Larry Eugene Warfel. And this is a name that he would actually use until he was 17 years old. He's born September 20th, 1970 in Los Angeles, California. He was born to Barbara Allen and Daniel Ira Warfel. They gave their home address. This kid's off to a great start. Spoiler alert. They gave their home address as 1332 South Bond Street, Los Angeles. This is important because this is going to show where exactly he comes from. The address they gave doesn't exist. Matter of fact, if there was a 1332 South Bond Street, that would be right somewhere in the middle of the parking lot at the Staples Center where the Lakers and Clippers play basketball. So I'm not super familiar. I don't watch basketball. I find it incredibly boring now that all anybody wants to do is shoot threes. I miss it from the 80s and 90s where dudes were just dunking and getting into fistfights. So NBA, if you want to bring me back as a viewer, more dudes driving to the rim. That's what we want. Daniel listed his occupation as a truck driver from Colorado, and Barbara said she was from Utah. This is all a lie. Occupations, names, everything except for the states of origin is all a lie. The reason for all the lies from the parents was to cover up the fact that they are on the run actively from law enforcement while they're having a baby. Larry Sr. was arrested in his hometown of Denver, Colorado for desecrating a grave in 1967. He was sent to the state reformatory at Buena Vista. After being paroled in 1968, he decided to rob a gas station and was sent back to the state reformatory. He was then transferred to a mental facility from which he escaped in 1969. So not only is he mentally unstable, he's crafty. Great. So with that being said, the history of the parents is important because it's going to show the kind of absolutely bonkers upbringing that Larry Phillips is going to have. He's born to parents that are on the wrong side of the law, mostly his dad. And he'd be grown up to never trust the police and to treat them basically as an enemy combatant. Whenever you have any kind of exchange with the police, make it hostile. Between October 27th, 1969 and September 27th, 1976, timeline here is a little hard to follow. The Phillips family completely drops off the radar and cuts all contact between themselves and their families. In 1974, his mother remarried a man named Alton O'Neill, who was also not who he claimed to be. By all accounts, Mr. O'Neill was an outgoing, personable guy. He told some people that he was a doctor, and told some other people he was a pilot, and some other people that he was a sniper that worked for the CIA. September 18th. Well, don't get too used to this O'Neill fella. Spoiler alert. September 18th, 1988, O'Neill is approaching his apartment on North Burlington Avenue in Echo Park. As he closed in on his door, an unknown person stepped from the shadows and shot him in the head at a distance of 10 to 20 feet with a 12-gauge shotgun, killing him instantly, which I probably didn't need to say. Because 10 to 12 feet with a 12-gauge, even if you don't have a choke on it, 10 to 12 feet, the spread is minimal. It's probably the size of one of those big coffee cups that you can eat cereal out of. The spread would be at that distance. And if it's birdshot, it may not have killed him instantly because birdshot's very, very small. If it's buckshot, there is 9 pellets in there that are the diameter of a 38 caliber like pistol round. And that will leave a hole in the back of your head the size of your head at that distance. So O'Neill is out of the picture. Hopefully nobody got too attached. Now we're going to skip ahead to 1976. Junior and his mother are living in Kiowa, Colorado, and Philip Sr. drops in to celebrate his little boy's belated birthday and is arrested in front of his son by FBI agents. How the FBI knew that he was going to be there at that address at that particular time, completely unknown. It is completely possible that Barbara called them to let them know he was going to be there so they could pick him up and get him out of her life and little Larry's life forever, for good, right? Who knows? Hard to say. What we do know, where it picks back up, is in 1986. Barbara moved her and Junior back to LA, hoping to create a better life for her son, which for somebody like me, who is not big on big cities, the thought of moving to Los Angeles to make for a better life, unless you're like, I'm going to be an actor, is completely alien to me. There's too many people. I can't imagine there's a bunch of work. There's too many people. And it's in California, so you lost me there. I don't want to live in a state where I'd immediately be a felon if I cross the border. So now, Larry Phillips Jr. is about to make a very smart decision. He drops out of school in 9th grade and gets really, really into what would become a lifelong passion, bodybuilding. I mean, by 9th grade, you except for like driver's ed, you kind of have most of what you're going to need. I can imagine there's probably a bunch of people out there like me that were told all the time in high school, you're not just going to have a calculator in your pocket. You need to learn how to do algebra. Hi, calculator in my pocket. No, algebra can suck it. But after this decision, he makes another very strange decision. He gets a gym membership, which, I mean, if you're going to bodybuild, you kind of have to. He goes to Gold's Gym in Venice Beach, where Gold's Gym in Venice Beach, if you're going to try to do like competitive bodybuilding in the late 80s, early 90s, or if you're like a dude that's just like jacked to the teeth, maybe with some help, and you want to become a professional wrestler, they're going to find you there. The weird part is not the gym membership. Kind of. The weird part is he bought a 5-year gym membership, which I can't imagine. Okay, so back from our ADD break. In 1986, a 1-year membership at Gold's Gym in Venice Beach cost about $60. So 5 years at $60 a year is $300. That's not terrible. Now, let's do inflation, shall we? A yearly membership now is $1,440. And since, again, I didn't pay attention in algebra, if we were to do this now, $7,200 for a 5-year membership. Without spoiling it, it's a good thing that this guy is about to get into the career that he's about to because he's not very good with money. Anyway, after, a couple of years working out at Gold's and trying to get to the point where he can try to do this competitively, he realizes he's really not cut out for competition bodybuilding, and he lets his membership lapse. Sad trombone sound. But before he let his membership lapse, he would make an unlikely friend in the form of Emil Matasareanu. Phillips found Matasareanu because he sought people out that he could manipulate into doing what he wanted them to do. Larry's half-brother would go on to say years later that Larry had a really interesting skill in breaking people down and building them back up in the form that he found most useful. November 3rd, 1990, Larry gets his real estate license. And there's one little problem. He was issued his license but needed to pass his third exam and pass a background check by May of 1992. Turns out they ran the background check in January of 1991, and his past comes back to bite him in the ass, and his license was immediately suspended. Why? Right? As far as we know, he hasn't done anything illegal yet. Stupid, yes. Illegal? Not yet. Except in 1989, when he shoplifted around $400 worth of suits from a Sears, back when Sears was around and also an ultra successful store. This earned him 3 days in jail and 12 months of probation. So after he gets his real estate license suspended, he feels like this is pretty much it for having a normal working life. At this point in time, Larry is living with his mother, his wife, and his first child. He decides to set up his own business. Well, less than legitimate, he was making a little bit of money. He found an empty property and set up Capital West Investments. He put his real estate knowledge to good use, selling well-made forgeries of discount mortgages and selling them to real estate brokers. After being reported to the authorities on a few bad deals, when the police decided to raid the office of Capital West Investment, all they found was an empty building. Shocker. Completely unfazed by this near miss, Phillips sets up shop again, except the cops are paying closer attention this time. The rest of that part of the story isn't really all that important as far as I'm concerned at this point. There is, however, a rumor that Phillips had a large debt to pay off due to a lawsuit somewhere in the area of about $450,000, which that's a lot of money. That $450,000 lawsuit in 1992 would come out to be, let's see here, $1,055,678.49 today. So Larry's finding himself in quite the pickle, you might say. Before we figure out how he picks his way out of this pickle, we have to talk about his sidekick, Emil Matasareanu. Oh boy. Decibel Stefan Emilian Matasareanu was born July 19th, 1966 in Timisoara, Romania, the only child of Valeria and Viorel Dominic Matasareanu. His mother was a member of the state opera, and having grown tired of the regime in Romania, she defected to Italy while on tour with the opera in 1974. I think this might have been under like Ceausescu. I could be wrong. Again, mini Romanian dick. All you have to do is type in Romanian dick, and this dude comes up. That's fantastic. So this was under the regime of Nicolae Ceausescu, who... oh boy, do I ever want to do an episode on him, because he was a monster. Also, I hate communists, so that was going to be really fun. Emil and his father would hang out in Romania for another 2 years until they could figure out a way to get to her in the United States. The family would settle down in Pasadena, California. Dad went on to work for Gilbert Engineering, and Valeria worked as a real estate agent, and Emil attended Pasadena High School. While in high school, Emil was bullied pretty intensely, which is part of what turned him into a little bit of a recluse that he's gonna be here. The thing is he did have a pretty close-knit group of friends, and none of them recall during interviews after this event that he was actually bullied at all. He passed through high school fairly anonymously. Most people that remember him said that he was helpful, he was pretty social, he had a good sense of humor, decent guy. In 1982, she applied for her state care license so that she could care for developmentally challenged adults, which is a very, very lucrative business for the family, bringing in about $1,000 to $4,000 a month, which back then is pretty good money. After a fairly quick period of time, the family moved to a new home on Sinaloa Drive, where Valeria began taking care of 6 male clients. They named the business Valeria's Villa. Very cutesy. Emil would actually be pretty helpful to his mother here. He helped out a lot with the clients that were described as, quote, high-functioning disabled adults. He was also extremely happy that the house has a pool, which, growing up, I guess, like here, you kind of take for granted stuff that people that come from communist shithole countries, like what we think of as totally normal, is like, oh, they have a pool. This dude was like, no, I have a pool. You don't understand. I have a pool. This is really cool. We're here, we're just like, yeah, it just means my homeowner's insurance is higher because we have a pool. Over the next few years, Emil would kind of fall in love with a new hobby, motorcycles. His bike of choice was a Kawasaki GPZ 550. He brought it into a shop and had some modifications done to it to make it faster, which, to me, crotch rockets are not something that I'm into because they're just not super comfortable. And also, they're already fast enough. So, unless you're really trying to, like, kill yourself, they're probably fast enough as it is. A guy he met through the shop named Kenny, who was interviewed in 2009, said, quote, Emil wanted a really fast bike, but his skills were not there. He was the type of guy that didn't want to wait for his skills to improve. He just wanted to be fast and have the best bike he could. Again, he grew up in a communist country, having cool not something he had as a kid. And now he's got a little bit of money and he's realizing that capitalism is pretty awesome because he can get a job and spend his money on stupid stuff like motorcycles instead of having to wait in bread lines. So he's going to buy stupid stuff like fast motorcycles. At the same time as he gets into his bikes, he also enrolled at DeVry University in Pomona, which was an actual physical university before it became a meme in the 90s that I remember, where it was just like, you want to go to school through the mail? Get a hold of DeVry, we'll send you stuff. Yeah, online courses through the mail, which was wild. And I know my listener demographics will go, oh yeah, no, I remember those. But for anybody under the age of, I don't know, 30, yeah, you used to be able to just send your information in and they would send you all your courses and stuff and you just did it and shipped it back. No big deal. While he was here, he took a 3-year degree program for electronic engineering. So 1988 is a pivotal year for Emil Matasareanu. 4 really big, really crucial things happen to him. So he graduates from DeVry with his degree. His father pushes him to like pursue his master's degree. He's really reluctant to do so. There's a story saying that his mother threw him a graduation party and nobody showed up except for the elderly neighbor across the street, which is really sad. So it kind of makes you wonder about all these friends and acquaintances that he'd had in high school. Number 2, Emil becomes a naturalized American citizen. Good for you. You came here with nothing. You came here from a dump. You became a citizen and you got like a job and a degree. Good for you. He also finds another really cool hobby, guns. And there is nothing wrong with owning guns. Just throwing that out there. He also started his own business where he is trying to seek his fortune, selling computer parts, providing PC services, and writing accounting software that he tries to sell to local businesses. This proves to be a little bit of a problem for him, though, since he's only about 300 miles south of Silicon Valley. And things have just really started to pick up. Like the tech industry in the early 90s just took off. So this means that he's got to try to offer his services at like barely making any money kind of prices. So here's where the two separate stories of these guys end, and their love story, as it were, begins. In 1989, Matasaurano and Phillips met at Gold's Gym, where they became fast friends, bonding over what they had in common, the enjoyment of bodybuilding. Now, previous to the event that we're going to talk about, they did some traveling. They made their way to Colorado, Littleton, Colorado, to be exact. On July 20th, 1993, they robbed a First Bank armored car. Luckily, there were no injuries to the drivers. Then October 23rd, 1993, Phillips and Matasaurano were pulled over in a brand new Ford Thunderbird that had been rented from an airport. They got pulled over the stupidest way you could, because they had left a gas station where they had done nothing illegal. They went in and got drinks and snacks and got gas, and they had done nothing illegal at this gas station, except for the fact that Larry Phillips drives like an ass and just went screaming out of the parking lot and basically almost sideswiped a cop car. Sergeant Ian Grimes pulled them over. So after getting a bunch of just absolute horse crap from Phillips about like, oh, the car's my mom's and I forgot my license at home, Sergeant Grimes has heard enough and he's like, okay, get out of the car. We're going to talk. He notices that both Phillips and Matasaurano had Glock 17 pistols on them. That would be probably Glock 17s. That's 1992. I'm going to say that's probably a Gen 2 ADD break. So after a very quick ADD break, it was right. The Gen 2 Glocks came out in 1988. Gen 3 didn't come out until 1997. So my gun autism is right there. It's very good. Also, like Glock, I know nobody from Glock's listening, but what the hell are you doing? You guys got into an argument with California over them banning your pistols, and then you're going to ruin it for everybody else. Like it's a pretty bad business model, guys. I know you also sell horse semen, but that doesn't mean that you have, instead of just continuing to sell your firearms elsewhere and changing them. Anyway, after he disarms both these men, the officer searched the car and found the following: a Polytech semi-automatic rifle with a folding stock that belonged to Matasaurano, a Norinco Mac 90 semi-automatic rifle with a wooden stock that belonged to Phillips, a Springfield Armory 45 pistol belonging to Phillips, and a Colt 45 pistol belonging to Matasaurano, 1,649 rounds of 7.62 by 39 ammunition, most of it loaded into 30-round magazines, 3 Chinese-made 75-round drum magazines loaded with 7.62 by 39, 967 rounds of 9mm jacketed hollow points, 357 rounds of 45 caliber jacketed hollow points, 6 smoke bombs, 2 improvised explosive devices, a gas mask, 2 sets of National Armor Level 3A plates, 200 channel portable programmable scanners with earpieces, sunglasses, gloves, wigs, ski masks, a stopwatch, 2 spray cans of gray studio hair color, 3 different California automobile license plates, and a sum of $1,620 in cash. So these guys are up to some chicanery. Needless to say, on October 26th, they were arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit robbery, grand theft auto, unlawful weapons activity, and carrying a loaded firearm inside of a car. During a preliminary hearing on November 8th, the grand theft auto charges were dropped due to lack of evidence, which, hooray, we didn't steal the car, I guess. In December, Phillips was sentenced to 99 days in prison. Matasaurano was sentenced to 71 days. Both also received 36 days probation, which is a strangely specific number. Not really sure why it was 36 days. After completing their sentences, they went back to work. On July 14th, 1995, at around 12:25 in Los Angeles, California, the two robbed an armored car owned by Brinks before making their getaway in a dark blue Chevy Cavalier. So this is an interesting robbery because it wasn't like catch him in traffic, whip the car in front of him, force the driver out. This was at a stop, and they caught the driver as he's coming back out to the car or going out to the building from the car. He is basically forced at gunpoint to open the back door. When he doesn't do it fast enough, they shoot the hinges off with automatic weapons, and they robbed this car. Unfortunately, in the commission of this robbery, 51-year-old security guard Herman Dwight Cook was shot and killed, and the car's driver, 53-year-old Felipe Cortez, was injured. 9:33 a.m. on March 27th, 1996, another Brinks-owned armored car was fired out on a street by a pair of would-be robbers that may or may not have been Phillips and Mata Serrano. There's really no confirmation that this was them, but everything kind of fits. You know, this attempted robbery was carried out by two heavily armed men with automatic weapons, this time in a maroon-colored Ford Ecoliner van. The driver of the armored car was slightly injured by flying glass, and the armored car sped off after they lost sight of the Ecoline. So this was a failure on their part. Now we're going to step up into some big-time escalation. May 2nd, 1996, Phillips and Mata Serrano have officially graduated to robbing banks instead of armored cars. They did this when they stormed into the bank owned by Bank of America at Los Angeles Van Nuys sometime before 10 a.m. Armed with, again, automatic weapons, they walk into the bank and they rob the piss out of it. Approximately 8 minutes later, the two made their getaway with $755,000 in cash. Then on May 31st at 10:05 a.m., Phillips and Mata Serrano rob another Bank of America. This time they left with $794,200, leaving two bank tellers injured. So with this one, they thought they were going to hit the jackpot. They thought that they were in for about a $2 million score. But due to new security measures, a significant portion of that money had been collected 2 days earlier. The pattern of the 8-minute robbery comes from, this is possibly my favorite part, because while researching this, obviously I have to find documentaries and documents and all this other stuff that I can online. One of the best parts was the fact that they patterned this 8-minute robbery scheme off of the 1995 classic Michael Mann movie, Heat, which means I got to watch Heat for research purposes. And if you haven't seen Heat, you should see Heat. It is awesome. Let's see. You got Robert De Niro, Val Kilmer, Tom Sizemore, Danny Trejo, Al Pacino. Who else is in that movie? There's so many like big name actors. Ashley Judd, I believe it was Ashley Judd is in that. Yeah, it is probably the best bank robbery movie that has ever been made. It is so good. So in the film, De Niro's crew of crooks start off robbing an armored car, and obviously it escalates to a large bank robbery at the end. So now, after we've watched Heat, we're getting up to the day. February 28th, 1997, Phillips and Mata Serrano arrive at the Bank of America-owned bank at 6600 Laurel Canyon Boulevard in a blue 1987 Chevy Celebrity that they had spray-painted white. Swear to God, this mask was sewn by a cross-eyed Chinese child, because there's no way in hell that it should fit the way it does. The two exited the car at 9:17 a.m. after taking fistfuls of phenobarbital, which is a muscle-relaxing drug that was actually prescribed to Mata Serrano as an anticonvulsant because he was a little epileptic. Not like super epileptic, but he had to take it so that he didn't like have seizures and whatnot. So they took this to calm themselves down, and they walked towards the bank, both of them armed, one with a Chinese-made Norinco Type 56 Sportster assault rifle, which I absolutely hate the term assault rifle with a passion. It's not a real word. It's not a real word. You can assault somebody with anything. You can assault somebody with a pencil. It doesn't make it an assault pencil. Unless it's one of those clicky mechanical ones, then that's a tactical assault pencil. Because there's the people out there that AR-15, the AR stands for assault rifle. No, if you weren't so busy being an elected official making laws about things that you don't understand, you could have simply Googled what it means. It stands for Armalite rifle because that's the company that designed it. It wasn't designed by Assault. Just saying. Anyway, and Larry Phillips walked in carrying a Heckler & Koch HK91A3, which is a semi-automatic 308 battle rifle. That's a big boy. Those are super cool. They're beefy. Like a 308 round is nothing to mess with. Anyway, Branch 384 of the Bank of America is located at 6600 Laurel Canyon Boulevard in North Hollywood, California. I want to talk about the location and the surrounding buildings really quick before we get into the robbery. It's not going to sound important, but it really is. I promise. The bank is tucked between customer parking lots to the north and south, and to the east is a 4-foot-high cinder block wall which separates the lot from the backyards of homes on Agnes Avenue. The western boundary is the 4-lane Laurel Canyon Boulevard. Across from there is the Valley Plaza Shopping Center, which is kind of like a mishmash of small businesses, including a Hughes grocery store, which is on the north side of the plaza. The surrounding area being so residential and within half a mile of the 170 freeway made the bank a really, really good target for a robbery. They would have a good choice of escape routes, and I'm guessing that if they could have gotten onto the freeway, it would have probably been way harder to catch them. I mean, I understand that the California freeway system is usually packed, but who's to say that we don't just get on there, drive up the shoulder until we can't, and then hijack a car and get the hell out of there, you know? At around 9:15 that morning, February 28th, 1997, Phillips and Mata Serrano pulled into the north lot of the bank in a white Chevy Celebrity, again, that they had spray painted white. Fun connection, my grandma, my Nana, had a Chevy Celebrity wagon, which, if I didn't have the mask on for theatrical purposes, of course, you could see the scar in my left eyebrow that I headbutted the Chevy emblem on the back of her car after taking my bike helmet off and running up the driveway and stepping on a wiffle ball bat and split my head open because I'm graceful like that. These guys pull into the parking lot, and because they are dickheads, where do they park? They back right into a handicap spot. I think here is a good place to address the fact that there's long been rumors that they got out of the car and they grabbed rifles from the trunk. These guys were giving themselves 8 minutes to get into and out of this bank with money. Personally, I don't think that these guys were backing in and going to the trunk and trying to figure out which rifle's whose and then loading them before heading into the bank, especially on such a tight time frame that they gave themselves. If it were me, if I were going to do this, that rifle is in the front seat with me. Either tucked next to the door, stock up against the door frame, or, next to me on the seat where I can easily get it and just get out. Not that I've ever robbed a bank, because I haven't. Thought about it, but I haven't. But I mean, who honestly has never been like, it'd be kind of cool to try to rob a bank, you know? Is that illegal to say? I don't know. It's just a daydream. This is all satire. So, it's satire. Free use. Satire. Free use. Anyway, at 9:16, the pair entered the bank. This is the worst timing ever. Because as they walked through the front door, Officer Martin Perello passed by and saw them walking into the bank. And he called in a 211, which is the LAPD code for an armed robbery. And then he turned around at the intersection of Archwood and Agnes. Perello has only been an officer for 18 months, and his partner is a 9-year veteran, Lauren Farrell. They pull into the south lot of the bank and took cover behind a truck, where Farrell would make the first infamous call of the situation, quote, 15A43 requesting assistance, possible 211 in progress, Bank of America, Laurel Canyon, north of Kitteridge. There is another person in the mix already, though. Wrong place, wrong time style. A 32-year-old male who just so happened to be at the ATM waiting for his receipt felt a presence behind him, and he turned expecting to see one of the bank guards, but instead came face to face with a masked and heavily armored, head-to-toe, Larry Phillips. The man at the ATM recalled Phillips saying, "Okay, let's go, mother," as he grabbed him and forced him into the bank. I've titled this next chapter in our story, Shit's About to Get Real. And just as a heads up, if language bothers you, I'm going to be using a lot of it here. And I'm probably not going to cut it out because they are direct quotes from these guys. As Phillips, Mataserano, and the unfortunate ATM customer from outside entered the main lobby, a teller dropped to the floor and hit the hold-up alarm. Both men raised their rifles, and Mataserano yelled, quote, "Everybody down, motherfucker, get down, or I will kill your ass." This was after, of course, he fired a series of rounds into the ceiling. Probably important to mention, his rifle has a 75-round drum magazine in it. In my experience with AK drum magazines, they are not super reliable, but I think he got the actual, like, Chinese or com block ones where they were actually good. The ones I've used have always been just doo-doo. As they continued through the bank, shouting and firing and waiting for demands to be fulfilled, officers Perello and Farrell had separated by a very short distance, and Farrell made the call to dispatch of, quote, "Laurel Canyon, north of Kitteridge, we have shots fired." Fearing for the safety of the people inside the bank, Farrell deployed officers to different strategic locations around the exterior of the building. At this point in time, the robbery has been in progress for less than 1 minute. We've already got hostages, we've got shots fired, we already have cops on scene, and we're 60 seconds into this robbery. Back inside the bank, Mataserano has reached the door of the teller station, which has a bandit barrier, which is an 1.25 inch thick sheet of polycarbonate, which would stop most pistol rounds up to a .44 caliber. Turns out that a 7.62 by 39 at a much higher rate of speed than a .44 caliber will gain you access with ease through a bandit barrier. Mataserano then found John Villagrana, the bank's VP, and demanded that he open the vault. They then went back to the teller line to retrieve the second key, because you have to have 2 keys to get into these vaults. And Mataserano is now growing impatient. He swats Villagrana with the metal folding stock of his rifle in the back of the head. That sucks. Again, the metal stocks, like the metal folding stocks in AKs, aren't comfortable to shoot. So I couldn't imagine getting whacked in the head with one would feel great at all. Anyway, Mataserano and Villagrana entered the safety deposit room, and the 5 people in there were ordered out. After literally a second or two, when he decided that the customers were taking too long, Mataserano rips another salvo of rounds into the ceiling to motivate them. In a little under a minute, the gunman had entered the bank, taking control of the customers and staff, and now all they needed to do was get the money and split. At around 9:19, detectives Tracy Angelis and William Kurlak arrive in the shopping plaza across from the bank. Kurlak later recalled, quote, "We felt like we had a couple of guys in the bank with handguns, so we felt pretty secure across the street behind the kiosk." That's what we call in the business foreshadowing. Sergeant Larry Haynes pulled his cruiser across the southbound lane of Laurel Canyon. Less than a minute after Sergeant Haynes arrives, he noticed the front door open. He called this over the radio, letting the other officers know. Phillips has opened the door and stepped outside to take a look to see what's going on, just to keep an eye out if there's any cops there. So at this point, with his line of sight, the only police vehicle he would have seen was Sergeant Haynes' cruiser in the middle of the street. Since I've already mentioned a bunch of other officers, he may have been a little misled about his situation, having only seen the one car. Phillips didn't seem upset or intimidated in seeing anything, and he just kind of moseys on back inside. The bank had changed their cash delivery systems from the one bulk delivery to being delivered in what were called burger boxes, which are pretty much like 5 smaller boxes, which would help prevent like a snatch and grab robbery by splitting the cash up into smaller amounts, so that if somebody grabs one box, they're not going to get all of it. They're only going to get some. And actually, that, like we talked about in the St. Albans raid episode, a lot of the time these bank robbers are not really paying attention to what they're grabbing. They're just grabbing money, and they're going to end up leaving a lot of it there. Now, the bigger problem for our friends in the bank is that the bank has not yet received the bulk cash delivery. Back in the lobby, Phillips has ordered the guard to get everybody ready to move to the vault on his say-so. 3 minutes later, Officer Martin Whitfield would pull his car up behind Sergeant Haynes. These two would be the primary target for what's about to happen. Back inside the bank, Mata Serrano and Villagrana were in the main vault, and there is a problem. Mata Serrano is starting to get really impatient in the vault, and he begins threatening Villagrana that he's just going to kill him and do it himself. So this guy is nervous, he's shaking, he can't keep himself together. Back outside, the car of rookie officers James Zaborovan and Stuart Guy. Zaborovan graduated from the academy the previous December and was like anyone at a new job, enthusiastic and looking to impress. Zaborovan and Guy joined detectives Angelis and Kurlak behind the kiosk. So here's the setup, where we're at right now. Phillips and Mata Serrano, obviously in the bank. Haynes and Whitfield to the north end of the bank. Officer Brentlinger is at the northeast corner of the bank. Zaborovan, Guy, Angelis, and Kurlak are across the street behind a key-making kiosk. Back inside the bank, Mata Serrano is still insisting on getting all of the cash. All he would end up getting would be $303,305, which I know I said all he would be getting. That's a lot of money. But I lied. He's also getting 3 die packs in the cash that he doesn't know about yet. After Mata Serrano exited the vault, Phillips gave the guard the order to move everybody to the vault. After all the customers and employees were forced into the vault, Phillips exits the bank and begins firing at the officers outside. Here is the weird part. Mata Serrano stayed in the bank for 4 minutes after Phillips started the fight outside. On our timeline, it's now 9:24 a.m. The pair had been in the bank for 7 minutes. Most of the officers outside expected that the robbers would exit, notice they were surrounded, and then go back in, barricade themselves, and at some point SWAT would show up and they'd go in and do what SWAT does in situations like this. Officer Haynes, who was by the driver's side of his cruiser dealing with 3 civilian witnesses by the names of Fisher, Golding, and Horan, when Larry Phillips steps back out of the bank and levels his Chinese-made Norinco Type 56. I apologize. I got that wrong. He doesn't have the H&K yet. He still has one of the Type 56s. But just to get there, all of the rifles they had would include 3 Norinco AKs, a Heckler & Koch 91A3, which again is the semi-automatic 308, and a Bushmaster XM15 dissipator. All of these, except for the H&K, are fully automatic. They have been illegally converted to fully automatic because unless you have just way too much money and proper licensing, you can't just buy an automatic weapon, no matter what politicians or the news want to tell you. You can't just do it. You can, however, modify cheaply made Chinese AKs fully automatic. I don't know how to do it. I know it can be done. I'm not going to Google it, though. Just saying. Officer Haynes sees the rifle pointing his way, yells out a quick warning to the civilians just as the first shots ring out. The rounds traveling at almost 2,500 feet per second ripped into the police cruiser. Glass and pieces of shrapnel flew everywhere. Officer Haynes took cover behind the engine block, which is like most of the time, if you listen to people talk about getting in gunfights, a car is concealment, not cover. You can get behind a car and you can lose track of somebody where they are. That's not cover. Basically, the only part of a car that would be cover would be if you can get behind the engine, because the engine block will maybe, probably, hopefully stop a bullet. Phillips then noticed movement behind another vehicle. This was Officer Martin Whitfield. Whitfield has the entire length of the vehicle between him and the shooter, and Phillips emptied the rest of his 75-round drum magazine at Officer Whitfield. Rounds impacted the car and windshield. The glass shattered and hit Officer Whitfield in the torso. That's going to suck, right? Whitfield would later say he had the thought of, quote, "You've been shot, don't panic." Then I was shot again. 60 feet to the west near the northeast entry were Officers Dean Schramm and William Lanz. At this point, Lanz has been an official officer for a total of 5 days. That's a hell of a first week. Lanz and Schramm decide to relocate to the nearby Del Taco parking lot to take cover. I think the only thing faster in this situation than the bullets is the diarrhea that Del Taco would give you. I would only imagine. Never had one, but if it's anything like Taco Bell, it is instant. They would cross Archwood, and Schramm turned to face Phillips. Lance was still crossing with his back turned to Larry Phillips. He's still out in the wide open, and he's armed with an Ithaca 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, which is not exactly the best situation for a shootout. Officer Lance took a round to the inside of his left knee, but somehow got himself into cover as Schramm is providing cover fire for him. Bounce back over to Officer Haynes. He's trying to keep the civilians in cover. One of the civilians would later say that he remembered looking around for movie studio vehicles to see if they had accidentally stumbled onto a film set. What a weird thought to have, but still, you're in LA, so who knows, you know? Haynes kept broadcasting. Full auto fire was easily heard in the background of his transmissions. Nearly 8 minutes after the first officer in need of assistance call went out, the entire North Hollywood Police Department emptied out. Most of the now responding officers took up position around the south end of the bank. So I could only imagine like a Blues Brothers style chase of police cars, just a pile of cop cars just moving down the street like a wave of black and white nonsense. Somewhere around a minute before Phillips began firing outside, Chuck Perigui arrived in a Eurocopter A-Star 350 to provide air support. This guy was a absolute badass. He was a pilot in Vietnam. He had earned a Silver Star and a Purple Heart during his tour, which earning a Purple Heart as a pilot in a helicopter is probably scary as hell. Perigui could see Phillips ducking in and out of cover. As he did this, Officer Zaboravan saw his opportunity. He stepped around the side of the kiosk that he had been hiding behind and rested the front bead sight of his shotgun on Larry Phillips' back. He fired, pumped a fresh shell into the breech, and fired again. Zaboravan is 211 feet from Phillips. That's a very long shot with a 12-gauge. He stitched a pattern of double-aught buckshot across the middle of Phillips' back. His aim may have been a little off due to the distance and, obviously nerves of the situation, but one pellet, again, the size of about a .32 caliber round, was a little bit lower than the rest. And it caught Larry Phillips in the only spot that he didn't have body armor. It punched a hole in his ass cheek. Phillips stumbled a little bit, proving to Zaboravan that his aim had been true. Phillips then turned and drew down on the kiosk as Zaboravan retreated behind it. He fired over 100 rounds through this plywood kiosk. Okay. Detectives Kurlak and Angelus got as small as possible, laying face down on the pavement. As rounds tore through the wooden building, Officer Zaborovan realizes that the detectives are not wearing body armor. So he is about to make the most selfless decision of anybody ever. He lays across the top of them to provide them some level of protection with his vest. Seconds after this act of bravery, 3 rounds struck Officer Zaborovan in the lower back. For anybody that's not familiar with what a 7.62 round will do to a human, I can recommend some ballistic gel videos to go watch, because that's a sizable round and it leaves a very big cavity when it goes in. So the way it works is the bullet will go in, and the force and pressure of the bullet create a cavity, or like wherever it's going will go out, and then it'll expand and then retract back in. But it doesn't retract all the way back in because there's a trench in the middle of it. At this point, Phillips turned his attention back to the cruiser where Haynes and the 3 civilians were in cover. Phillips raked the cruiser with rounds, one of which hit Officer Haynes high in the shoulder. He also wounded 2 of the 3 civilians. Which, I mean, 3 for 4 is a pretty good day at the plate, but this guy's an ass, so we don't want to give him any credit. Behind the kiosk, Detective Kurlak asked Zaborovan if he could move, and they began moving from car to car. The cars around them were peppered with bullets, and the 2 were showered with broken glass and asphalt as Phillips began firing at them again. So at the same time, Officer Guy and Detective Angelus are trying to move north through the lot. Guy moved ahead and took cover behind a van. As Detective Angelus moved, she was out in the open, pistol in one hand, radio in the other. Larry Phillips sees her and stitches a series of rounds at her. Somehow, she tripped just as he fired. Rounds popped and skipped all around her, and it seemed like it was only a matter of time before she's going to get hit. Just as it's looking bad, Phillips caught Zaborovan and Kurlak in sight again and switched targets, allowing Angelus to scramble to cover with Officer Guy. You want to call that divine intervention, or, you know, having somebody looking out for you? I think that's probably what we have right there. Kurlak and Zaborovan are running across the lot towards a set of glass doors, and just before they got there, the doors shattered due to rounds, thankfully missing their targets. So they just had like a full-on like Die Hard moment right here. The 2 dived through the remains of the door and climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, where they found a dentist's office. Zaborovan collapsed at the top of the stairs, and Dr. Jorge Montez, who is the dentist, would administer first aid to the best of his ability, as Detective Kurlak would cover them with a 12-gauge, watching the stairs in the doorway that they had just crashed through. At this point, more officers flooded into the area, and Phillips retreats into the bank and dumped the 3 empty 75-round drum magazines. As of right now, Larry Phillips' ammo pouches are all empty. Phillips came back out of the bank through the ATM lobby, hauling half the bag of money. Emil Matasoranu was kicking the other end of the bag out the door. Things had gone from bad to now much worse. 9:30 a.m., around 16 minutes after the whole thing started, the 2 psychopaths exited the bank into the ATM lobby and remained there for less than 2 minutes, which was long enough for them to take 2 more officers out of the fight. While firing from the lobby, Officer Stuart Guy was hit in the right thigh, leaving a massive hole in his leg. Detective Tracy Angelus would later say, quote, his pants were smoking like they were on fire, and there was a huge hole in his leg. The force of the impact lifted Guy off his feet and dropped him on his ass, but he was somehow still thinking quickly and clearly enough to remove his gun belt and use it as a tourniquet, which, using belts as tourniquets is an option. It's not a good option, though, because you really can't crank down on it as much as you can with a tourniquet, which is why cops now carry tourniquets. And honestly, not a bad thing to have on you, like in your bag that you take with you daily. Maybe I'm a weirdo. I've got tourniquets in my bag with me, just in case. You never know. After the 2-minute spree from the lobby, Phillips and Matasoranu exit, still thinking that escape is possible at this point in time. And honestly, the police up to this point are pretty sure these guys are going to get away because they are way outgunned. 200 feet from the door, officers Whitfield and Haynes decided to make a hard choice. They decided to leave the cover they had near the civilians to draw fire away from them to try to keep them safe from these madmen. One or both of the shooters noticed them moving and began firing. Rounds chased the officers and struck the asphalt and cars around them. Phillips then slung the money bag and walked out of the lobby while Matasauranu provided covering fire. Here, a few things happen all at the same time. Local news teams begin to arrive on scene, including a helicopter. As the news crews arrived, the gunmen were making their way towards officers Haynes and Whitfield. Whitfield sprinted towards a tree, trying to put some distance between himself and the gunman when he thought he tripped. He thought he hit a exposed tree root or some broken concrete, but then he noticed the massive and immediately threatening wound in his thigh. A 7.62 by 3.9 round had smashed a chunk of his femur that shattered 4 to 6 inches of bone. So first of all, femur shots are really bad because you have this neat thing in there called your femoral artery. If that gets hit, you're in deep trouble right then. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of fixing that if it gets severed. He would spend the next 20 minutes behind the tree, and the entire time he is fighting for his life. Officer Haynes was shot a second time. It's unclear whether he was hit while he was trying to help Whitfield or if he was hit trying to get to cover himself. The second round that he gets hit with hits him in the shin. So these guys are scoring some very painful leg shots. Let's pick back up. Larry Phillips was walking down the sidewalk where moments ago he started this gunfight with the police. He's got a duffel bag full of cash, $303,305 worth of money, slung over his shoulder, and a Norinco Type 56 rifle in his hands. 3 of the die packs in the bag have already detonated, damaging quite a bit of the money, but most of it was still bricked and wrapped in plastic. Phillips moved somehow unseen by most of the officers while Matasauranu provided inaccurate cover fire. When Phillips reached the Chevy Celebrity they arrived in, he dropped the money bag by the passenger's door and grabbed a fresh ammo belt from the trunk. Phillips, now loaded back up with ammo, would spend the next 22 minutes in this area, with the change of location and the dynamic of the fight changing drastically. Matasauranu is still firing from the ATM lobby while Larry's outside. Phillips is now fighting from the parking lot where he could move from car to car, and he also has walls on 2 sides of him and a lot of cover and concealment. Now, here's where I run into a question, like tactically. Why didn't Larry Phillips just hold position in the parking lot and wait for Matasauranu to make a getaway? They clearly have the police outgunned. Why not just have everybody get out, get in the car, and take off? There is some speculation that they came into this looking to get the money and to get into a fight, which they've succeeded in both things. Phillips then moves to the northeast part of the parking lot because he knows the police can flank him from the drive-through ATM lane. The robbers have done their homework. They know every point of exit and every street and side road in the area. These weren't just a couple of goofballs with automatic weapons. They've cased this bank out for weeks prior to the robbery. Phillips and Matasauranu didn't know it yet, but the tide is turning against them. 30 seconds after Phillips made his move to the car, Matasauranu followed in his footsteps when he was struck in the head by a round fired from his left side. The round tore a 5/8-inch furrow between his right eyebrow and his upper eyelid. So, right about here is where that hit him. Which, I mean, getting shot in the face would probably be a mood changer, you know? The effect was that he dropped to a knee at the hood of the Chevy Celebrity and put a hand to his face. Facial lacerations bleed like crazy. If you've ever watched like any UFC fights or pro wrestling or anything like that, where somebody will get their eyebrow exploded, like in a boxing match or something like that, facial cuts just bleed like nobody's business. Thankfully for him, the wound wasn't life-threatening, but it was so close to punching his ticket that he has no idea how lucky he really was. Matasauranu was then hit a second time. This one grazed the inside of his right calf. It's not really known if the leg shot was before the face shot or if he was hit twice at a very similar point in time. We don't really know. Neither shot seemed to really bother him all that much. The face shot probably bothered him more because it's going to have blood running into his eye and affect his vision. But the leg shot, he just kind of shook off because these guys are all kinds of up on phenobarbital. So after the initial shot to the face, he only spent about 12 seconds at the hood of the car before he enters the driver's side. After Matasauranu entered the car, it seemed like he lost the will to fight. He prepped the car and didn't fire another round for quite a while. He just got shot in the face. He doesn't want to play anymore. I get that. Not that I've ever been shot in the face, but I've been hit in the face. And that sucks. Phillips, on the other hand, seemed like he had no idea what had just happened to his partner in crime, or he didn't care. He continued to fire and take fire for a few more moments, including being hit 3 times, twice almost fatally. So the only reason he wasn't shot fatally is because of the homemade body armor that they're wearing. Both of them had custom built their armor to fit them. It's very effective body armor for what they were expecting to come up against. It's going to stop handgun rounds. Because as we're going to find out here in a little bit, not a lot of these cops had semi-automatic pistols. A lot of them were still carrying revolvers in 1997. Think about that. Think about what cops have now. And in 1997, they're still running around with revolvers in Los Angeles. But that's gonna change here in a minute. Phillips didn't realize how close officers were to closing in on him. They approached from the drive-through side of the building. Phillips kept peeking around the corner towards the ATM, and he spotted 2 officers and opened fire. While firing on them, 2 more officers took shots at Phillips from a different angle, and this would become the most useful tactic for the officers from this point forward. We're going to distract and hit him from here. Distract and hit him from here. That's the only way that we can really do anything with these guys. Officer Edward Bretlinger was parked diagonally across the eastbound lane of Archwood and moved to the eastern wall of the north lot where the shooters were. He unloaded 27 shots towards Phillips, hitting him multiple times, but with no noticeable effect. Again, that's the combination of body armor and barbiturates. Officers Bancroft and Harley then took a risk, and they decided to take turns popping up so they could see over the wall that they hid behind to take shots at the now crouching Phillips. Bancroft would later say that he remembers seeing Phillips' clothing moving as if the rounds were hitting him, but he didn't seem to notice, which has got to be horrifying. To hit somebody 5 or 6 times with a handgun and just have them just go, what was that? You know, because you see the clothes pop and probably dust and stuff, but they're just eating it and keeping moving. Phillips then fired a volley at the 2 officers who quickly took cover. He would then turn on their position to head back to the Chevy, and he noticed Bretlinger nearing his cruiser and fired 40 to 50 rounds at him in short, controlled bursts. That's another thing with automatic weapons is I've had the opportunity to fire a couple. They're really cool. But if you just hold the trigger, it's so inaccurate that you're not going to hit anything, and you're all over the place. Even with a smaller caliber, like a 223, like what an AR-15 would fire. The inaccuracy is incredible. So with a larger round, like a 7.62, you'd be all over the place. But doing just short, controlled bursts, you're going to be a little bit more accurate. This is more of an accuracy by volume situation, but you get my drift. So here's another thing to remember and think about. At this point, the radio at dispatch is going crazy. There's calls of officers down, requesting medical units, and the most common request coming over the radio is for SWAT. If you're not super familiar, or if you're from out of the country, SWAT stands for Special Weapons and Tactics. And these are the guys that get called in when things get ugly and doors need to be kicked in and bad guys need to be shot in the face. The calls for SWAT hadn't fallen on deaf ears like everybody kind of thought they had. 4 cars carrying 5 officers were on their way to the scene, but were snagged in traffic on the 170, which is a huge highway. If you're watching on Spotify or Patreon or YouTube, I'm going to throw in some video clips later on in this episode, just because one of these SWAT officers might be the coolest man that's ever existed, because he is out there in his booty shorts, because he had just been out for a run, and They're like, hey, we got to go. And he just grabbed his shit and got in a car. And he's in like a t-shirt, like white New Balance and these tiny little like nut hugger shorts. It's amazing. At the same time that SWAT is stuck in traffic, the radio waves are open for a full 60 seconds, giving updates on the position of Phillips. And at the same time, a crash unit was starting to arrive on scene. The crash unit is an anti-gang unit. Also would have names like the Jump Out Boys, stuff like that. They're very interesting, especially the ones in LA, because they are, or were at least, super corrupt, I guess would be the best way to put it. Some of them were doing some very below board things. I don't know if they still do or not, but the crash unit was headed away from the bank to Oxnard Street and the location of B&B Guns, where they would get a hold of 9 rifles. After firing another salvo at Officer Bertlinger, blowing all the windows out of his cruiser and sending chunks of concrete flying into his face and chest, knocking his glasses off, Phillips stepped back towards the Chevy and fired at the 2 officers near the Del Taco. He then returned his attention to Bertlinger. He really, really does not like Officer Bertlinger for some particular reason. Probably because he's been the most effective hitting him with rounds. As Bertlinger tries to get himself out of the line of fire, another officer approaches Bertlinger's vehicle, and he takes some serious fire also. Officer Corrado Torres took a round across the right side of his neck, and this made him think that maybe he was a little bit too close, and he fell back to the side of the house on the north side of Archwood. Across the road from the house he was at was a 1980 GMC Astro garbage truck. So between this truck and Corrado Torres, these are going to be 2 of the 3 biggest things that would stop these 2. Larry Phillips is now slowly pacing left to right at the front of a nearby Ford Explorer, seemingly annoyed. I think at this point he's probably starting to freak out a little bit. As he's pacing back and forth, he comes into the firing line of the officers located at the Del Taco. They fired on him. 1 round found home, hitting Phillips squarely in the chest. In the time it took Phillips to double over after the impact, a handful more rounds peppered the bank wall behind him. So they were shooting the entire time, and because he dipped, because he got shot in the chest, he didn't take any more. I mean, one of those potentially could have just like hit him in the head and partially ended this situation a little bit quicker, but it wasn't to be. He would spend the next 25 seconds on a knee behind a car trying to reload, and I'm guessing probably catch his breath, because no matter how good your body armor is, you get hit in the chest, it's going to knock the wind out of you and break ribs, crack your sternum, all kinds of fun stuff. It's meant to keep the squishy stuff inside from getting exploded with bullets. It's not meant to make you warm and fuzzy and comfortable if something hits you and you're just like, ha ha ha, no, I didn't feel that. So now with things picking up speed, Phillips is starting to realize how many officers are actually on scene. He turned to the northeast corner of the bank and encountered a fresh set of officers. Officer Caparelli and an unnamed officer were approaching Phillips' position from the back lot as Phillips was walking past the teller lane. Phillips did a bit of a double take, not really expecting to see even more officers closing in on him. He shouldered the rifle and fired at the 2, showering them with cinder block chunks, but thankfully, no bullets. At this point, officers have the main streets in the immediate area blocked off, but the main concern was the mass of small side streets that the police didn't have the manpower to contain. Because they're really thinking about it like, we need to keep these guys from getting on the highway. And the main way to get there is through these bigger main, like, artery streets. Schools in the surrounding area would go into full lockdown, and in some cases, students wouldn't be released until 8 p.m. that night. There's a reason for that, and we'll get into that at the end here. The Burbank Airport would redirect air traffic so that incoming flights wouldn't pass over the firefight. SWAT at this point is still stuck in traffic. A mile south of the bank, officers rolled into the parking lot of B&B Gun Sales. The store didn't open until 10 a.m., but the staff inside called the store owner, Bob Kahn, and he instructed them to let them in and give them whatever the hell they asked for. Because not only is that doing the right thing, probably also a tax write-off, and your insurance is going to cover it. The officers would end up with 5 Colt Sportster AR-15s and 2 Remington Model 1187 shotguns, and a buttload of ammo and magazines. Back on the opposite side of the street from Larry Phillips, photographers Mike Meadows and Gene Blevins, along with the Telemundo 52 crew, are within 250 feet of Phillips and would catch 11 minutes of him, mistaking him at first for a SWAT officer because of the way he was dressed. Jump back to Officer Martin Whitfield again. He's the guy that was shot in the leg, in the thigh. He's bleeding really, really badly, leaned up against a tree. Whitfield is starting to fade in and out of consciousness as he stays in contact with dispatcher Guadalupe de la Cruz, who was trying to keep him calm and, more importantly, keep him awake. He kept asking for help, and she assured him that help was on the way. Enter Unit 9A37, the car crewed by officers Anthony Kubanek and Todd Schmitz. These guys, in my opinion, were two of the biggest heroes in the whole situation, and that's saying something considering what we're talking about. They decided they needed to get to Whitfield, and they could not wait for the armored V100 vehicle that was on its way. This is a vehicle that they were sending out specifically to try to get wounded officers into it because it's an armored truck. They got to get him to the hospital quick. Kubanek and Schmitz climbed into their cruiser and intended to go get Officer Whitfield. Well, en route to Whitfield, they came across Officer Guy, who was still trying to get his gun belt tourniquet tied on. While Kubanek and Schmitz are on their mission to help fallen officers, news choppers captured footage of Phillips laying his Norenko in the trunk of the Chevy and retrieving the Heckler & Koch 91. This thing is a monster. The AK platform in general is really fantastic because the AK is kind of like the 1911, where it's an old design, but if it ain't broke, you don't fix it. Whereas the HK91 is firing, instead of a 7.62 by 3.9, it's a 7.62 by 5.1, which is the NATO military equivalent of a .308 hunting rifle round. Most of the time you're going to see that chambered in like bolt action rifles for like long range shooting, like snipers would use .308s. I think they've moved away from .308s quite a bit, but the .308 is a substantial round. And he's now got it in 20 round box magazines. Phillips casually walked back to the driver's side of the Chevy and slapped the door a few times to get Monteseranu's attention. He then stuck his arm into the car to grab something, and at this point in time, he gets hit again. This time in an unarmored part of his right arm. The round went through and through, leaving a pretty good wound. But again, he's all messed up on drugs, so he doesn't really even notice it. He turned and fired back at the officers by the Del Taco. After checking the drive-through lane again, Phillips stepped in front of another vehicle in the lot, and an officer took 2 shots at him. One missed him and shattered the windshield of the car behind him. The other one hit him in the stomach. And again, the body armor did its job. They did a very good job creating this stuff. Phillips, at this point, I think, is starting to realize that he's getting really lucky here, and he wants to get out. But he doesn't realize that luck that he has is running out very quickly. At this point, for some reason, Phillips decides to take a few pot shots at the news chopper. Well, he's wasting ammo firing at the chopper. Kubanek and Schmitz continued their extraction run. Now, full disclosure, to be completely clear, Kubanek and Schmitz never came under any direct gunfire. A lot of sources will make it out like they were just like if you watch the movie 44 Minutes, they make it out like these guys just drove through like Fallujah in 2005 with just rounds pinging and wanging off of everything. They didn't take any direct fire, but they are still in the middle of doing something heroic that is going to save lives. Anyway, when they approached the lot, they got Officer Guy into the cruiser with the help of Detective Angelis. They returned Officer Guy to a casualty collection station where he was transported to Holy Cross Hospital for treatment, which a casualty collection station for a bank robbery means that you're not having a good day at all. Casualty collection station is usually for like a mass casualty event, like a building collapse or something to that effect. But yeah, this is a bank robbery. After dropping him off, Kubanek and Schmitz took off again, this time to go pick up Whitfield. They took a different route to him because the most direct route would have had them pass right through the gunfire, so they approached from the north. And at this point in time, Whitfield has stopped responding to dispatch. This is bad. This is a scary situation. The dispatcher would try and contact him nonstop, trying to wake him up. After failing to contact him, De La Cruz unplugged from the console and had another dispatcher take over. I don't think this was like a shift change thing. I think this was more, I need to go get coffee because I'm pretty sure I just listened to a man die on the radio kind of situation. So the primary objective for a handful of officers now is to get to Martin Whitfield, no matter what. Back to the action. Phillips was now kneeling in front of a Ford Explorer. He did something that will seem a little bit weird to some. While he's taking fire, he's trying to reload. He pulled out a drum magazine for his AK, which is not going to fit in the H&K. Again, the Heckler & Koch is running on just standard 20-round box magazines that come with the rifle. If he had dropped his AK and picked up the third one out of the trunk, or if he had picked up Emil's AK, interchangeable. Those magazines, no problem. But with the HK having a proprietary magazine that only fits that rifle and won't accept any other kind of magazine, he's making mistakes. Or maybe he's not making mistakes, because as soon as the H&K runs dry, he returns to the trunk of the Chevy and grabs the AK. Well, he still has that magazine, that drum magazine in hand. Meanwhile, while Larry Phillips is reloading and changing rifles, Emil Mataserano heard over the police scanner that they had in the vehicle that something is happening now that I would have loved to seen the look on his face when he heard this. SWAT has arrived on scene. The 4 cruisers with the SWAT team pulled up to the curb of Victory Boulevard, 2 blocks south of the bank. Officers Werder, Anderson, Gomez, and Massa would make their way to the south lot. Werder flagged down an armored car, not a police armored car. He flagged down a bank armored car. It's kind of ironic to think about it, that these guys that just showed up to kill these bank robbers would show up in the kind of vehicle that they had been hitting years before that. Maybe it's just me. The vehicle really wouldn't offer too much protection against the caliber of weapons that they're using, but it's a workable plan that's come up on the fly. Back in the north lot, Mataserano heard the call. He pulls out of the spot because, remember, they had the common sense to back in. All Larry Phillips has to do at this point in time is get in the car. If he just got into the car, even though it's got 2 flat tires, I really think they could have made a pretty decent escape attempt, because you're 2 heavily armed men. You could just drive this car until you're far enough away from the police, and you're in Los Angeles. There's other cars all over the place. Could have very easily just carjacked somebody and taken off. Instead of getting into the vehicle, Phillips decides to walk next to it, and he's again switched back to the HK at this point in time. And he's just walking and firing alongside the vehicle. And as he's walking and firing, he again has another AK mag in his hands. We only know this stuff, like all these little details that I have like this, we know because there is so much footage of this. If this had happened today with the amount of body cameras and dash cams and security cameras on buildings, this would have been insane to watch all the footage of. I mean, it's already crazy enough to watch the footage of it from like the news helicopters and the news crews that are on the ground, but I couldn't imagine with the tech that we have today. Holy hell, this would have been something else. Emil Mataserano is still driving, but he's kind of slid over towards like the middle, almost into the passenger side of the car, and he starts firing through his own windshield. When he starts firing, Phillips spun to his right and crouched, thinking that he's taking fire again. He then went back to the trunk and swapped rifles again, back to the AK. Officers took this opportunity to fire at him again, and the fire drove him back to the passenger side of the car. This new onslaught of fire that he's taking is from 2 different angles. From the right, he's getting shot at by Bancroft and Harley, and he's also getting shot at by multiple officers from the front. It seems that 3 injuries happened in fairly quick succession here. 1 to Phillips and 2 striking his rifle. The round that hit Phillips hit him in the left hand, passing through his thumb. It doesn't matter how many drugs you're on. If you get your thumb blown off, it's going to be hard to operate that rifle. I mean, he's right-handed, so that'd be your front hand as a righty. But still, if your thumb's all flippy-floppy and all over the place, you don't have a lot of extra grip there, so you'd almost have to like rock up and C-clamp it from underneath. This time, he did react to being shot much more dramatically than before. He drops his hand away from the rifle and keeps firing one-handed. The other thing to remember, like I said, the rifle got hit twice. The round that took the H&K out of the fight hit the magazine well, which dented the metal enough to make it nearly impossible to dump the magazine and replace it with a fresh one. He now has to switch to another AK, and he has no choice. Jumping back to the SWAT team, Werder ran into the middle of Laurel and Kitteridge and flagged down the Ford F-700 armored vehicle and climbed in, finding himself with 5 other officers. The 5 officers that are in here are not SWAT. They're a mix of like patrol guys and the jump out boys that have all just kind of amalgamated into one vehicle. The rest of his SWAT team is going to continue on without him. Phillips is back in the trunk of the car again. He grabs the Norinco 56 S1 and steps back to the passenger side of the car where he's hit yet again. This time under the armor wrap of his left forearm. This one clearly hurt because he's seen leaning over the back of the car trying to position the rifle so that he could use it somewhat effectively. So he's been hitting the left thumb and the left forearm. So his left arm is pretty much out of the fight here. And yes, you can fire an AK with one hand. You're not going to hit anything, especially if it's full auto. Montessorano would then push the passenger's door open for Phillips to get in, and Larry would push the door closed with his body since his left arm was being held tight to his side. The message he's sending here was Montessorano was to keep driving while he walked next to the car shooting. So remember when I said Larry Phillips' luck is like running out here? After firing a few quick bursts, the AK jams. This is most likely a stovepipe jam, which is probably the most common that you would see with an AK. And that's when the piston doesn't cycle far enough back to completely kick the empty casing out. And as the casing's coming back out, the piston's coming back forward and it pinches it against the top of the inside of the receiver. So it's just sticking out like a stovepipe. It's a fairly easy one to clear, usually, if you have both arms where you can kind of work the action with one and slap the casing out. But when you have one arm that doesn't work, probably a little trickier. He does manage to clear the jam and continue firing, though. He fired in multiple directions, mostly where officers had been that he had fired upon beforehand. They entered Archwood, and the fight is now mobile. After taking to the streets, Phillips scans the area of Haynes' cruiser and turns his back. At this point, Phillips lurched forward due to a round hitting him in the back. The round hit him just at the neckline of his armor and passed all the way through his middle trapezius muscle. It was most likely very, very painful, obviously, but he didn't seem to notice it. A second round hit him in nearly the same spot just a couple seconds later, and this round would carry much worse injuries for Larry Phillips as the fight is going to continue. Phillips would then take cover behind the garbage truck. When he did this, he took another round through the right shoulder. This round was slightly lower than the first shot, and it broke his collarbone and severed his subclavian artery, and finally hit his shoulder blade and deflected downward into the muscles in his back. He didn't realize it yet, but Larry Phillips Jr. is a dead man walking. Phillips fired again from behind the back of the garbage truck. This is when the rifle jammed again, and this time for the final time. This was confirmed as a stovepipe jam, and I just explained that to you here a little bit ago. As Phillips takes cover behind the garbage truck again, Montessorano limps the car to the side of the truck. Officer Conrado Torres stepped from his cover at the side of the house to Montessorano's left. He raised his Beretta and opened fire. He fired 12 rounds. Several rounds hit the car. None of them hit Montessorano. At this point in time, Phillips and Montessorano have been separated. They would now have to fight back to each other, which this is not a good sign for our bad guys. An unmarked burgundy Crown Vic was going slowly towards the intersection as the Chevy came barrel-assing through it. The unmarked car contained officers Harley, Bancroft, and Caparelli. Bancroft and Harley have been the bane of Larry Phillips' existence for a lot of this gunfight because they've just been beating the crap out of him with bullets. Caparelli looked left just out of habit, checking for traffic, and he didn't see any more cars, but he did see Larry Phillips. Before the car could even come to a complete stop, Caparelli got out of the back seat and moved to within 30 feet of Phillips and fired 6 rounds in around 2 seconds. That's pretty good shooting. To this day, he can't recall how many shots he fired at Phillips, but it's for sure that he definitely hit him with one of these here. Phillips' only reaction was to turn slowly towards him with the AK in hand, and Caparelli takes off, hurdles a fire hydrant, and crosses Agnes Street, and joined a handful of other officers behind some cover. Harley and Bancroft would follow the Chevy and leave Caparelli on his own. Caparelli would then stand and fire the remaining rounds in the magazine at Phillips. At this point, something has changed in Larry Phillips' attitude. He didn't have the same confidence or swagger that he had just a few minutes before when he came out Billy Badass out of the bank. He seems like he's starting to realize that this is the end. Realizing that he can no longer use his rifle, Phillips dropped it and drew a Beretta of his own from a shoulder holster. So he has a Beretta in his right hand, and his left hand, he's got a magazine for the H&K, which is definitely not going to fit in a Beretta handgun. It wouldn't really matter what he had in his left hand because he's not going to make it across Agnes Avenue. There's 7 officers and 2 detectives behind him and the car. He still had some kind of purpose in the way that he was walking, even though he's lost a lot of blood from at least 9 gunshot wounds. He raises the pistol and fires a single round at the officers on the corner of Agnes Ave. Caparelli stepped out from behind the van that he was using as cover and was shocked that Phillips is less than 60 feet from him. 60 feet in a pistol fight is a pretty good distance. I mean, you can hit somebody at 60 feet. Most gunfights are like with pistols are not going to be fought at 60 feet. Phillips swung the pistol towards him, and Caparelli ducks back into cover. Larry Phillips stood swaying slightly in the sunshine as he aimed at the officers, and another round found home. It hit him in the right hand. It barely grazed him, but this was ultimately the final straw. It was enough to make him drop the pistol. He's physically drained from blood loss. He bends and picks up the pistol. He drops the rifle magazine. And after he stood up, Larry Phillips Jr. pressed the barrel of his nickel-plated Beretta up under his chin and pulled the trigger for the final time. The 9mm jacketed hollow point entered his oral cavity at somewhere between 1,200 and 1,400 feet per second. The round exited his skull, leaving an L-shaped wound. He was dead before he hit the sidewalk. Police rounds kept hitting the ground around him, including one round that hit him in the back of the neck and partially severed his spinal cord. So one way or the other, he's dead. At the age of 26, which is insane to think that you've committed this much crime in like, I don't know, probably maybe 6 years total that you've been an actual scumbag. Well, he was a scumbag from the time he was born. But like a crime committing scumbag, probably 5 or 6 years. That's a lot. At the moment of Phillips' suicide, Matasaurano was between Ben and Gentry Avenue, trying to keep the Chevy moving. With the trunk lid bouncing around, he's got 3 flat tires and just more bullet holes than car at this point. He keeps it rolling, trying to put distance between himself and the pursuing police. This time frame is the turning point for Emil Matasaurano. He would go from being kind of lackluster in his actions during the incident to acting like a cornered animal, which is dangerous. As he continued down the street, he pulled in front of a red Ford Tempo that was coming towards him. The driver of the Tempo, seeing a giant masked man in the vehicle in front of him, put the car in reverse and backs up and gets out of there. This part's kind of funny. Emil got out of the car and tried to wave the driver back to him. As the Tempo fled, Matasaurano stood in the street for a few seconds. He's just kind of looking around, and he's not quite far enough away, so it's very possible that he looked back and saw his dead friend on the sidewalk. He stood there for a full 8 seconds before re-entering the car. Footage would show that he is limping really badly, trying to keep weight off of his right leg as he's walking back to the vehicle. One officer saw him make a fist and pound it twice on his chest. They're not sure. They're like, maybe this was like a final salute to his dead buddy. Maybe we don't know. He's losing blood. Maybe he's just doing weird shit. When he got back in the car, he sat there for another 13 seconds with the door open, doing absolutely nothing. He eventually dropped the car back into drive and starts moving, and the car is spewing gas from a large hole in the fuel tank. He would attempt to hijack another civilian vehicle where he swerved in front of another car to try to block it off, and then he rethinks this plan because he would end up blocking the new car with the one that he's trying to get out of. He then pulled into an intersection and sat there for approximately 14. His plan here is pretty clear. Sit here, wait for another vehicle to come by into his path. 4 vehicles were approaching. The first car passed, and as the second one approached, he cranked the wheel and hit the green sedan. After hitting this car, he changes his mind when he saw a 1962 Jeep Gladiator coming down the street. The old 60s Gladiators, way cooler than the new ones. As the owner of the Jeep is sitting there dealing with Matasauranu, the officers near Phillips cordon the area off as SWAT shows up, and they're pointed in the direction where Matasauranu had fled off. While all of this is going on, the armored vehicle is now headed north on Laurel Canyon, trying to get to Martin Whitfield before it's too late. While driving down Laurel Canyon, someone noticed the 3 wounded civilians and stopped to pick them up. Matasauranu has now roughed up the Jeep's owner and was transferring some of the gear from the car into the Jeep, including the previously unseen rifle, the Bushmaster XM15, which had a 100-round drum magazine attached to it. As he's sitting in this Jeep, Emil's world is starting to close in around him. Officers are approaching from multiple directions, including the car carrying the SWAT team. As officers approached the Jeep, they thought it was a wounded civilian inside until they saw Matasauranu look up and saw a massive head with a mask on it. He would have made a break for it, except for the funniest detail in this entire thing. He climbed into this Jeep after he loaded all of his gear into it. He didn't realize that it's a manual transmission and he can't drive stick. So as the car approaches, Matasauranu got out of the Jeep and makes a beeline for the front of the white Chevy that he had limped there. Emil had options the whole way through this incident, but he keeps making the wrong choices. All he has to do at this point was to get out of the truck and put his hands on his head, but he chose to keep fighting. As he makes his way to the Chevy, the driver of the SWAT car cranks the wheel and stops the car at an angle in front of the Jeep. At this point, the SWAT team is within 30 feet of Emil Matasauranu. This is pistol range, right? For SWAT guys. Dudes on the SWAT team at 30 feet with a pistol will kill you. There's no questions asked. But they're getting into a fight at this distance with a guy with long guns. This is going to get ugly really fast. Matasauranu is draped partway over the hood of the Chevy. An officer opens fire from a black and white police cruiser, firing through his own windshield, missing Matasauranu by 5 feet. That's a big miss. I mean, if you're just trying to distract him, yeah, 5 feet's plenty to miss by, but 5 feet if you're trying to kill this guy that's a lot. Emil Matasauranu then flipped the selector all the way to full auto, and for just under 5 seconds held the trigger, continuously firing through the windshield of the Chevy at the approaching officers. 5 uninterrupted seconds of gunfire may as well be an hour, especially if you're on the wrong end of it. As he fired wildly, Officer Anderson slid out of the passenger seat of the unmarked car and planted 2 rounds in Matasauranu's chest. The rounds have 0 effect because this is the most reinforced part of the plate carrier that he's wearing, obviously. At this point, Officer Massa switched spots with Anderson so that Anderson could clear a malfunction with his rifle. While fixing the jam in his rifle, Anderson has a stroke of genius. If they get down and they fire under the vehicles, they can hit him in the legs that are mostly unprotected. One of the first rounds that SWAT members would fire under the vehicle would break Matasauranu's left leg just below the knee. The description of this makes my legs hurt. The round entered just left of his kneecap, shattering his knee. With Matasaurano still refusing to quit, he was hit with 3 more rounds, one being a through and through to his thigh, and the next 2 would lead to his death eventually. Another round hit him, causing a nasty reaction. He was spun to the right, and his finger tensed and fired 3 rounds into the curb. At this point, he is almost out of ammo, he has no sidearm, and he has no way to reload. But he also realizes that he's being shot from under the car. He crouches and begins to fire blindly at the officers. It was struck 3 more times, with another round possibly hitting his right thumb, which, on your firing hand, that's no bueno. He's got no more fight in him, and he surrenders. 44 minutes after all this started, it's finally over. As he laid there, officers moved in and kicked his rifle away. One officer kicked him in his badly broken leg, trying to make him roll over. And right about here is where there's a conversation had between the officer and him, and the only part of it that is really remembered to anybody is when he said, quote, "Fuck you, shoot me in the head," because he didn't want to go to prison. It's now 10:01 and the shooting was over, but the area would not be officially cleared and reopened for another 13 and a half hours. This is because officers would continue to search the area because there had been a couple of reports of a possible third shooter, which there wasn't. Emil Matasaurano would be held in police custody for the rest of his life, which was about 66 minutes after he was shot the final time. He would bleed to death. Now, a lot came from this entire situation. This is the main reason that a lot of police departments, especially in California, really got upgrades with firearms and armored vehicles and all this other militarized stuff that they could get, was because they realized that 38 revolvers, oh my God, my hair is insane. They realized that 38 revolvers aren't going to cut it against people like this. And if you're not familiar, Los Angeles in the late 80s, early 90s was a war zone. So these guys had to really step up their ability to handle situations like. Another thing that happened was Emil Matasaurano's family tried to sue the city of Los Angeles and the LAPD for letting him bleed to death in the street, which obviously that case didn't go anywhere. But the reasoning that they gave for the fact that they didn't render him, well, I'm assuming they would render aid because that's kind of what police do in a situation like this. But the reasoning that they gave that no EMTs showed up is because they had to clear the area because they weren't sure if it was safe or not to have people there. And it's one thing for the cops to be shot at. They don't want you shooting at EMTs and firefighters. Unfortunately, there are some cities in this country where firefighters have to wear body armor if they go into certain areas because they'll get shot just because they're, an authority figure. So, oh, hey, didn't see you there. I'm editing the episode and still feeling like dog shit. So there's that. Wanted to hop in here because I completely forgot to mention the casualty list for this whole thing. First and foremost, I want to start with Larry and Emil. These are the only 2 people and the only thing that actually died. Thank God. Larry Phillips was shot a total of 11 times throughout this whole thing, including his self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. Homeboy Emil, on the other hand, was shot 29 times. So he took a whooping. Forgive me while I look off screen here. So for the innocent people and police officers that were shot during this whole thing, Sergeant Larry Haynes, who was shot in the shoulder and leg, Officer Martin Whitfield, who was shot and seriously wounded 4 times, including the femur shot. And I forgot to mention that the dispatcher that had been talking to him the whole time, that had somebody tap in for him, was actually Whitfield's, I can't remember if she was his fiance at the time or his wife. So she got to listen to her either husband or future husband bleed out and pass out after being shot. Officer Corrado Torres, who was grazed on the right side of his neck. Officer James Zaborovan, who was shot in the ass. I'm sorry, buttocks is what the Wikipedia says here. Somebody really should change that to ass, though. Detective John Kurlak was hit in the right ankle. Detective Tracy Angeles was grazed in the stomach and ass. Officer Stuart Guy was hit twice in the right femur and right forearm. That guy got really, really lucky. Detective Earl Valerdes was hit in the head by flying debris. Again, super lucky. Officer Ed Bertlinger was hit by gunfire and concrete fragments in the face and forearm. Bertlinger was a nightmare for Larry Phillips. He had his number the entire time. Officer William Lance was hit in the right knee. Officer John Goodman, was treated for abrasions. Man, that's good, because I don't know what would happen if we lost John Goodman. Emperor's New Groove would have sucked. Officer David Grimes was injured in a traffic accident responding to the shooting. Officer Manuel Valerdes received a superficial head wound, so don't really know exactly what that would involve. For civilians, Mildred Nolte was struck across the face. I'm assuming she was in the bank. John Villagrana was struck across the back of the head with an assault rifle. He was the bank vice president that Emil beat the piss out of with the butt of his rifle. Javier Azorco was hit across the face, I'm assuming again inside the bank. Barry Golding was hit by flying glass and fragments. He was one of our 3 civilians outside. Tracy Fisher was hit in the left pinky toe. Oh my God. Oh. I mean, a 7.62 round's almost the size of your pinky toe, so that thing's just gone. She was another one of the civilians outside. Michael Horan was hit in the left side of the chest. He was the 3rd civilian that was out there. Jose Haro was hit by flying glass and fragments. William Marr was hit by glass and fragments in the right arm, left temple, and nose. That sucks. Anyway, wanted to put that in here because I remembered that I forgot it. Okay, love you, bye. But I really hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. I'm sorry if I sound like shit. I'm fighting a head cold because October has been Octobering very hard this year. At time of recording, I'm in between weekends of the haunted house. So I am exhausted. I am sick, but I wanted to put something out. I wanted to get this episode out because I was really excited to do this one. I'm just hoping that it actually reaches everybody and not just the folks on Patreon and YouTube, because I, again, at the time of recording, am currently fighting with Spotify over an issue with my show where right now they still haven't released the Tank episode that I put out that was supposed to be out this past Monday, which would have been the 20th. I'm just waiting for them to decide whether or not I can continue to use music that I paid for. That apparently wasn't an issue for 27 episodes. Just saying. Hit episode 28, and all of a sudden they're like, whoa, what's this? Music? But anyway, if you want to hear the show, and you want to make sure that you hear the show, head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/1159media. Gets you early access to my show, gets you early access and backdoor access to everything else over there. If you like what I'm doing and you want to show me a little bit of love directly, I have a Ko-Fi. It's ko-fi.com/historygoonpod. I appreciate any donations. I don't expect any, but I appreciate them. But I'm tired. This is a long episode. Full disclosure, I had to record this over the course of 2 days because I was so tired that I couldn't finish it last night. I really tried, but it just wasn't going to happen. So anyway, thank you guys for everything that you do. Please continue to support the show. Spread word. Let other people know. And until we meet again, we're all going to die someday. So go out and do some goon shit and leave a mark in the world. Just like Larry Phillips and Emil Monteserrano did. Thanks.